Hello, everyone. My name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show, and thank you so much for joining us here today. We have a good one for you. As always on the show today, we start with some important new reports and reaction to the Flower Massacre, as it's now being called. We talked about it on Friday. Just the horrific prosecution and the horrific just killing nonstop. Or I believe it is actually Saturday. I apologize. Of just people waiting for Flower. Since then, we've seen two separate reports of it happening again. Absolutely horrific. Also, we will take a look at Super Tuesday and the interesting perception of the Donald Trump presidency piece in the Times about that I do want to get to. And also, we will end with a report from the Electronic Intifada getting on this early, as always, about how Israel is targeting those looking for cell phone signal. So some pretty horrific stuff there. As really, it is true. It's not wrong to say, as always. That is for sure. So I mean, you got just every day. It feels like it's a broken record. I think it's there's some podcasts out there. There's some media outlets. That try and balance it. They know it's depressing, but I think that is almost kind of a mistake to do, in the fact that there is, there's just so much awful stuff happening every single day. And it's important to follow all the developments as they happen. And if you want to do that, if you want to stay informed on what's going on, of course, I'd like to posit Newsflash as the show for you to do that. So we get right into it. And we start with this reports of the Flower Massacre. In less than a week, Israel has committed several massacres against the hungry. On Sunday, March 3rd, Israel bombed an aid convoy, killing 7 people. But the most infamous incident was on February 29th, what has come to be known as the Flower Massacre. And I think it's important to say, which totally belies, I think more than anything else, belies the fact that this was some sort of Palestinian. Whatever they wanted to call, I feel like every Israeli source was calling it, something different. Some way that, it was a trampling. It was people died in the crush. People were trying to attack, the people giving out the aid. I think that, it just makes it the best piece of evidence, I think, to just completely belie that fact is the reality. This has happened so many other times throughout the course, on smaller scales. And of course, what do we see? We see, we have to wait for the investigations. This is very concerning, but of course we have to wait for the investigations coming from, people like, America. We can't trust Hamas disinformation. And then since the Flower Massacre, it has already happened 2 other times, in the last 3 days. I mean, it's just absolutely horrific. It's absolutely horrific. It's unimaginable. On Sunday, March 3rd, Israel bombed an aid convoy. And then, of course, the Flower, 115 starving people were killed in Gaza City. We've seen just, by the way, horrific images of just starving kids, just looking like skeletons. Just really, really horrific. And just unimaginable. When Faris El-Weya, 52, a resident of Shaf East area east of Gaza City, told Mondo Weiss what he saw when he left the house. Only 2 reasons justified braving the war zone that was northern Gaza. The first was the image of a starving family made up of 5 children, and the second was the hope of returning with some flour to show for his trouble. I left the house not knowing what day it was, and I don't know what day it is as I talk to you now. I heard that anyone who goes through the Nablusi area of Gaza can find aid from the trucks passing through the north. I didn't hesitate, even if I was taking a risk. It's better than watching my family starve to death. Ugh. And it's just absolutely unimaginable. You got 5 kids sitting probably in one room, dilapidated room, no access to anything, and you're just going out and trying to find food for them. And so he walked for 3 hours. He reached the Bluesy roundabout, where he found throngs of people already waiting for the convoy to arrive. There was hardly any room left for people to move, as someone brought their entire families with them to try and carry as much aid as they could get their hands on. Some had set up camp in the area the night before, as the Bluesy roundabout had become. And by the way, this was Israeli brought in aid. Israel, Palestinians received calls from Israel telling them to go to this area, telling them to come get this aid. They come in on the trucks and they just opening fire. So this is a really interesting, to get this perspective from someone who was there at the time. Near the roundabout, by the way, again, this is in Mondo Weiss. Near the roundabout was an Israeli checkpoint guarded by several military vehicles. The army had placed checkpoints at Gaza's 2 main entrances, the Nablusi roundabout on the Gaza coastline. and another site near the Kuwaiti roundabout on Salah al-Din Street. This convoy's designated route passed through the coastal road. So this is, right on the beach. I believe it's called Al-Rashid Street, where you get this really just horrific, just massacre of 110 plus. I think it was like 115 in the end. People, the Salah al-Din Street area, and it's just usually people aid it by taking off the trucks that passed through. He had it, but this time when the trucks entered, people swarmed the trucks in hysteria because of the famine. I mean, it is completely sensible that they do that, and I think anybody who is saying, "Oh, well, they were swarming the trucks," is just, either it's just a combination of incredibly stupid and uninformed of the situation, uninformed of the the nature of the famine that's been going on there, but also they are just really evil and just can't really conceptualize, I think, Palestinians as human beings. I think that is perfectly obvious there. When this happened, the soldiers prevented those who had entered the checkpoint from passing back to the northern side, opening fire on the crowd. So it was suddenly hundreds of people found themselves on the south side of the checkpoint, with everyone else on the north side trying to get that aid. So that's when they opened fire. Those who were able to make it to the northern side managed to do so by crawling and hiding. Elawea continued. So, pretty much give you kind of a visual sense. So you just picture this roundabout here on the Al-Rashid Street. So due to the, Israeli-created desperation of the famine that was going on, there were people that were pushed, people that were shoved, and people were shoved beyond the checkpoint that was set up on the south side of that road. Right by the coast of Gaza, and that apparently, according to this eyewitness, was when people started firing. When this happened, so when the checkpoint split the crowd in two, and soldiers prevented those who had entered the checkpoint from passing back to the northern side, already entered the checkpoint, opening fire on the crowd. So international observers, including UN officials, visited injured survivors at Al-Shifa Hospital, confirming the majority of the wounds from the hundreds of injured people were, as everybody suspected, due to live ammunition. Like, of course there was a crush. Of course there were desperate people. Of course there was because there is a famine on, like, literally right now. But the thing was, the broader thing was that the crush happened because of Israeli gunshot wounds, and because of the Israeli choices to fire on these people. So it's been 40 days, and none of my children have seen the sight of bread. Here, just have no choice but to risk your life for just saving the children, because if you die by gunshot wound, it's quicker than just watching your children just wither away with no food. The danger we face trying to get flour is nothing compared to how we feel on those nights, talking about the nights of hunger. But instead of returning home with food in tow that day, he returned frightened and shaking, hardly believing that he was able to survive the bullets that had whizzed past his body and hit others besides him. The last time Faris Elewa, ate with his family was 2 days before speaking to Manda Weiss. We'd received 2 cans of fava beans, he explained. My wife put them on a plate. We ate them plain without bread. With the blink of the eye, the plate was gone. He said ruefully, the food was so little that it vanished within seconds. The people, and again, it really does, there was a really kind of poignant anecdote that I saw on Twitter, actually, was that, quoting from the Elie Wiesel book, Night, about the Holocaust, and essentially that they would put the concentration camp Nazi guards would put scraps of food in the middle of the jail, and they just have the Jews and all the rest of the people in there just fight for it, and just fight like dogs for one little scrap of food. And that is just exactly what we have going on here. They're just they're just pitted against each other, all to just get 1 can of fava beans for 5 people. It is just absolutely just horrific, and they're just shot for fun, shot at leisure. It's just you can only imagine, because we've seen the way in the past that the Israelis have joked about shooting Gazans. A famous shirt went around: 2 shots, 1 kill, was the shirt that IDF people were wearing. And that was going around when they were shooting pregnant women back in 2018. 1 shot, 2 kills, excuse me. But hunger and thirst are quickly threatening to be more dangerous to people than the incessant airstrikes. In such times, a family that hasn't eaten for 3 days is far from rare. You are even likely to find somebody who has not even for a week. Ahmad Imtiaz, 28 years old. He lived with his wife and 3 children in the Zaytun area, but fled to the Ramal neighborhood after the neighborhood was reinvaded by Israeli ground forces. He is also present during the Bluesy roundabout incident and was able to return home carrying some food for his family. And he just, Ahmad Imtiaz said, "I didn't know how to explain to my children that we don't have any food," he said, just after, given the reality of the situation. He said, "I waited for the convoys as the number of people swelled to the thousands," saying he got to the Bluesy roundabout around 10 a.m. There was a few trucks that arrived. One was carrying canned foods. Another was carrying frozen chicken. People rushed the trucks before they even reached the Israeli checkpoint. Most of the people surrounding the trucks were shot or injured. Ahmad was able to return home carrying 4 cans of fava beans and a single chicken he had managed to grab. "I grabbed the food and crawled through the dirt," Ahmad explained. "I crawled for a very long time. I crossed almost a kilometer until I reached a safer place where I could get up and run." Ahmad did not hesitate when asked whether the trek was worth it. "Yes," he said, "to save my hungry children, yes. Our lives have become so meaningless and so cheap for so many people to die this way," he observed bitterly. "Children die, women die, families die, all from hunger. I don't know how to explain to my children that we don't have food," Ahmad said. "I don't know how to face them and tell them that they will continue to go hungry. I would rather face death than have to tell them that." And just the feeling of just humiliation, the feeling of you not being able to provide for yourself, the feeling of watching your children wither away and die, beyond all of the health effects, beyond the imminent risk of death from airstrikes, imminent risk of death from drinking poisoned water, salt water, drinking grass, eating grass, eating animal feed. You also have that just intended psychological effect that you see so often in the genocides to break down, to demoralize, to just dehumanize the Palestinians as a people. And it is just, you're seeing it, I think, clearer and clearer by the day. And people who don't, start and speak out and do whatever they can to just, mark their, opposition and their horror at what's happening, they will go down in history as just people, just atrocity enablers, atrocity, supporters. It's just unimaginable. Yeah. Meanwhile, we've seen some of the reaction to this coming as well from the New York Times. First, instead of starting to correct, as we talked about in detail last show, to correct its questionable reports on sexual violence during the October 7th Hamas attack, the paper is conducting an internal witch hunt, one that targets its Middle Eastern and Muslim employees to track down the sources of leaks about the scandal. Second, the Times continues to blame the Gazan victims for the February 29th flower massacre, in which Israeli soldiers opened fire on a crowd of hungry Palestinians, killing more than 100 people and wounding 700. The Intercept continues its value reporting on the Times' botched coverage of sexual violence. On October 7th. It's used internal sources at the paper and also translated a podcast in Hebrew from Anat Schwartz, one of the quote-unquote reporters. And again, it is really fair to say quote-unquote reporters because this is essentially just got put on to report on Israel-Gaza, never had any experience reporting before, or no kind of credentials or anything like that, just get popped in at the New York Times and writing one of the most consequential stories on the war yet. We already knew that 2 of the 3 bylines in the Times belonged to Israelis with no experience in journalism, one of whom had already revealed vicious anti-Palestinian bias, that's referring to Anat Schwartz there, on social media. Instead of taking action to fix the problem, the paper has launched a witch hunt to target employees of Middle Eastern and North African backgrounds for their national origin, ethnicity, and race, Union President Susan D. Carava said. "We demand the Times cease what has become a destructive and racially targeted witch hunt," which is just really just absolutely shocking stuff. Just apparently going to the Middle Eastern North African group at the New York Times, demanding some of their reporters, private correspondences, demanding some of their messages within each other, and demanding that they specifically come in and sit down for interviews, and not even just going to the people in that collective, not just going down the membership list and asking them, literally just asking the people in the the MENA group at the Times. It's just, you cannot make it up. The Times does have a simple solution at its disposal. It needs to assign real reporters to do the sexual violence stories all over again. At this point, it appears the paper sees no reason to do so. Speaking of the heavily criticized report, Times international editor Phil Pon told The Intercept, "We remain confident in the accuracy of our reporting and stand by the team's investigation." Meanwhile, the paper's breathtaking bias continues elsewhere. This morning, the paper put up Patrick Kingsley's news analysis of the Flower Massacre, which exonerates Israel completely. The headline, "Lack of plan for governing Gaza formed backdrop to deadly convoy chaos." And although the competition in the article was fierce, here's the single most offensive sentence, and get ready for this. "More than 100 were killed and 700 injured," Gaza health officials said, after thousands of hungry civilians rushed at a convoy of aid trucks, leading to a stampede and prompting Israeli soldiers to fire at the crowd. Dishonesty in that sense is staggering. Again, people, as we talked about, were going towards the truck in a dense manner. I'm sure there was some pushing and shoving involved because they're undergoing a famine situation. But what happened first was the firing of, and the injuries came from the stampede that happened after, I think is the key point, after Israel fired at the group trying to get aid, of the, group of Gazans trying to get aid. And we have seen this confirmed, again, time and time again. How does a desperate rush for food by unarmed people justify shooting 800 of them, killing 100? This sentence sadly cites Gazan health officials, but we can doubt that it was they who whitewashed the Israeli military. But Kingsley's dishonesty here is even greater. Anyone who has followed Israel's murderous invasion on alternative media knows that the Israeli military has been caught many times killing and torturing civilians and proudly desecrating Gazan homes. So the Times has completely refused to cover the Israeli military atrocity, and Patrick Kingsley obviously felt no need to provide the context that might have hinted to readers what did happen on February 29th, and no mention of the, kind of precipitating and causal impact, the causal role that the shots at the border had, and it really was just quite obvious. So, and what happened, if you are struggling to understand, is that an army that has committed war crimes for nearly 5 months decided to slaughter more starving and defenseless human beings who are presenting no threat. And we've already seen, by the way, incidents like this happen twice over, since February 29th. It is just... you cannot make this stuff up. You just can't. All right. We are going to go now to our very next story. So not all that long ago here, this is in the New York Times, many Americans, let's see, I'm going to be interested to see how they cover this and see how, appropriate or inappropriate it is to the situation. This is kind of, just about Donald Trump here and Super Tuesday. Many Americans committed hours a day to tracking then-President Donald Trump's every move. And then, sometime after the riot on the Capitol on January 6, 2021, and before his first indictment, they largely stopped. They're having trouble remembering it all again. More than 3 years of the distance from the daily onslaught has faded, changed, and in some cases warped Americans' memories that, at the time, felt searing. Polling suggests voters' views on Trump's policies and his presidency have improved in the rearview mirror. In interviews, voters often have a hazy recall of one of the most tumultuous periods in modern politics. Social scientists say that's unsurprising. In an era of hyperpartisanship, there's a little agreed-upon collective memory, even about events that played out in public. But as Trump pursues a return to power, the question of what exactly voters remember has rarely been more important. While Trump has taken his campaign on nostalgia for a time not so long ago, Biden's campaign is counting on voters to refocus on Trump, hoping they will recall why they denied him a second term. Remember how you felt the day after Donald Trump was elected president in 2016. Biden wrote to a fundraising appeal last month, which is, certainly going to really just remind people who already love Biden and already hated that that feeling, who are crying on the morning after the loss of Hillary Clinton, those people are already kind of pot committed. Remember walking around in disbelief and fear of what was to come? And I feel like, there is two elements to this. I feel like people, compared to the hype, compared to the way the media framed it, I feel like it definitely did not, because, again, the expectations were just set so high. It was like the sky was set to fall down at any moment. democracy was set to end. Like, the stakes could not be more high. And I do think there was a risk, and there is definitely that fact of it, and the fact that people have had this more time to come in and digest what really happened with the Trump presidency. Because I think you have the two factors. First, I think the fact the media really overplaying things, and just continuously making everything and there was a lot of things that people were repelled by with Trump, but it tended to not be as much things that the media focused on, whether it be the tax cut, whether it be just some of the more warmongering stuff that he did throughout his time in office. And there was a lot of very, very valid things, and his rhetoric on immigration, his policy on immigration, I think was a big thing that they focused on. But a lot of the stuff, was, I think, very, in the way the media covered it, was very, very amorphous and very, very, kind of unfamiliar to, or, unvisceral, I guess would be the better word, to regular Americans, and unless they were really, really reminded of it and had it pushed in their face every day. And the second part of that is kind of tying into that is after January 6th, things really did calm down. He was banned off Twitter. He was out of the news for a good 2 years. And the kind of other side of that is the crises that seemed inherent to the Joe Biden administration, the Donald Trump administration, continued just as much under Joe Biden. Like, the explicit pitch of Biden 2020 was that you won't have to turn on the news, you won't have to watch as much, you will be able to just sit back, chill, and essentially as the cliche goes, go back to brunch, right? So it like that, especially with whether it be their inflation, whether it be just, the people's paychecks not catching up with inflation, whether it be the war in Ukraine and all the money that we're spending there, whether it be, of course, by the way, the genocide in Gaza is a big thing. Like, the situation has not calmed down to the degree that Biden advertised when he first got in. And that is a big, big contributing factor to the dynamic, I think, that we're seeing of people saying, wait, Trump kind of has been out of sight, out of mind. He's not been on Twitter. He's just kind of been in his own little world, talking to his base, kind of been in this internal feedback loop with his base that I think Democrats should and, will try to break, if they want to win. But also, Biden hasn't really done a good job of calming things down and providing a smooth, steady alternative to Donald Trump either. And that has been, I think, a pretty big factor, and something I'm willing to bet, the New York Times doesn't really cover here. So for now, the erosion of time appears to be working in Trump's favor as swing voters base their support on their feelings about the present, not the past, which is, kind of fair. A New York Times Siena College poll, but Biden has to make it kind of about the past because the past was a very recent past, and Trump is, obviously trying to make that, reality come back yet again. So a poll conducted late last month found that 10% of Biden's 2020 voters now say they support Trump, while virtually none of Biden's voters had flipped to Biden. Trump's voters had flipped to Biden, excuse me. The poll found that Trump's policies were viewed far more favorably than Mr. Biden's. And, what I would really be interesting to, hear it articulated, what most voters say his policies are, what they did for him. I think it's most likely going to be, very amorphous. It's going to be based around, keywords like strong, telling it like it is, and, a slightly better, but kind of in an amorphous way, economy. I think it's very, very interesting to, but it will not be, kind of as amorphous, and it will be mostly born out of the fact that Joe Biden is not doing anything, is not really putting up any kind of counter narrative to make the case that A, I'm strong, I got a handle on things, and I think obviously the age really does not help with that, and B, that I'm doing something to manage these crises, whether it be the economy, whether it be he has increased his messaging on that, but just not really in a very effective way. I think that's the one thing that does have a shot of getting significantly better as a fundamental indicator for him before the election. But also with the crises abroad, with the war in Gaza, with the fact that the Trump line that is, I think, sinking through more and more is like, our leaders aren't taking us, like, they're laughing at Joe, he's too old, and I feel like people really just fundamentally and very rationally so, I would say, look at Biden's age, and they say, how can we justify this? How can we put this person up on the world stage? They don't want to put Trump up on the world stage, but they say, they increasingly have a lot of trouble with Biden. Polls suggest that Trump has made inroads with voters who may have been too young to remember his first term in detail. The nearly 4.2 million 18-year-olds who are nearly eligible to vote this year were in middle school when Trump was first elected. Polls show they have soured on Biden in part because of support for the Israeli war in Gaza, saying they favor Trump on the issue, even though Trump was a staunch ally to Israel while in office. So I think those people, if they were kind of more liberal-minded, I think there's definitely kind of the social conservative trend of just, kind of idiot Gen Zers who are just like, yeah, I love Trump. He's going to be strong. He's going to be bad. It's just a very kind of an amorphous way. Depending on where you are in the country, it can be more kind of explicitly socially conservative. But I think those people aren't going to, really go after Trump, but they may stay home. They make the margins a bit closer, and that enthusiasm that we talked about in the end of last show is going to play a big role in that part of the electorate. Ian Bars, who works for a funeral home in Atlantic, Iowa, said there were parts of Trump's record that seemed to fade. He often marvels about how his Trump-supporting friends recalled the 2017 through 2019 halcyon days, and they had all forgotten about 2020 and the year of COVID, he said. Now, I don't blame Trump for COVID, Barr said. All those things, the lockdowns, those happen under Trump. It's common for Americans to look back fondly on ex-presidents. A Gallup analysis in June found that 46% of adults approved Trump's handling of the presidency based on what they heard or remembered. Trump's approval rating when he left office was 34. Asked about what, I think the more he takes a higher profile in the news, the more he especially starts to espouse some of the extreme right-wing stuff he's going to espouse. Those same people, I think Biden amplifying that is going to be a very effective strategy. And those same people that were just like, yeah, he wasn't that bad. I feel like my paycheck wasn't as small as it is now. Those kind of stuff, those kind of vibes, I think will be really, really effectively pierced through if you start Trump, play clips of Trump being like, we're just going to fire them and replace them with guys who like me, just like the things he's been saying about, the federal, the civil service. Like that is like a very unpopular thing with a lot of Americans, whether it be abortion, whether it be talking about stop the steal, all these things, are things that Americans genuinely don't like. It could be very, very effective in for the Biden campaign, if he doesn't want to do any actual positive campaigning, which when do Democrats ever want to do any actual positive campaigning? But asked about what he remembered about the Trump administration, Roger Laney, a 55-year-old independent, undecided voter in South Carolina, described a general sense of chaos. He made great media, Laney said, recalling about how he listened to public radio. Okay, Democrat here. And calling on how he would listen to public radio on the way home from work and think, okay, what has Trump done this time? But the frenetic pace of the Trump years meant that many Americans made Trump news an obsessive habit or tuned out completely. The rat tat volume coincided with the continued rise of siloed, algorithm-driven social media, which, by the way, I think it's important to say, has only increased now. So I think people, see this Trump era as a point that we can never go back for, a time where we kind of jumped off the deep end and things didn't necessarily return back to normal under Biden, which I think is a big thing as to why people are seeing this the way they are, and kind of not really in the way that this piece is clearly getting a little angry about. They're not really appreciating the full gravity of the situation. It's really serious. Like, come on, like Trump was bad, remember? Again, there's a lot of factors. Like, Trump was bad. I think there's ways to help people remember how bad Trump was. But this kind of just like, he was really bad. Trust us. Like, remember? Don't you remember how much you hated him? Like there's smarter ways to go about it rather than this kind of panicking. All right. So we go now to our last story, a report out of Gaza by Amjad Aman Yagi. On the morning of February 10th, Mohammed Obeid, left the home of his relatives in Nusrat refugee camp in central Gaza Strip, where he had been sheltering to try and get a signal on his phone. It did not go well. Signal in the camp was weak, and he, along with other young men in search of signal, wandered down Salah al-Din Road, which runs almost the whole length of Gaza north to south. They were still hundreds of meters away from the street when Obaid saw an Israeli drone heading straight for the group. I wanted to get an internet signal because I was using an eSIM and I needed to check on my sister and her sons still in the north, but then the drone started approaching. The men turned and ran, but too late. The drone, a quadcopter equipped with a rifle, opened fire, and Obaid was shot in the back. Another man was also injured, and both were rushed to Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in the city of Deir al-Balah. They were not the only casualty of a desperate search for connectivity. The only way, you have to really kind of get out, get to a high place, because this kind of satellite signal that they use in Gaza is to get up to a high place, get that signal, and of course that makes you a sitting duck for these drones that come around. Again, posing no threat. These people posing no threat, just clearly trying to get the signal. And Israeli people, Israeli army, they know full well what's going on, what they're doing, and what this whole idea is. So high ground, again, it's often sought by people looking for a signal, but because it's obviously going to be closely monitored by drones, and it's kind of a perfect spot for them, and they have been regularly targeted. According to, really, really good source on this is the Euromed Human Rights Monitor, where at least several civilians were killed looking for signals in late January and early February. Often in areas where the Israeli military had taken full control on the ground, like in northern Gaza. The human rights group said Israel particularly targets civilians trying to pick up communications and internet signals in besieged areas where serious human rights violations are occurring. In an attempt, the group continued to prevent press coverage of it and make it difficult for residents to report such violations. Again, this is what they would say, put as their own, kind of national security interests, is to stop this kind of stuff. Ismail al-Masri said he tried to pick up a signal in the Tel al-Zatar area of northern Gaza. He wanted, according to his brother Mohammed, 28, to send out a video containing a plea about starvation in northern Gaza from a group of young people who were there, like him, sheltering at a school run by the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. The school is located in Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza. Before he was shot and killed by what Mohammed said was an Israeli sniper. My brother was killed with a single shot to the back of the head. We don't know where the sniper was. At the same time, on the same day, February 8th, 3 others were shot and injured. Since the 7th of October, Israel has completely cut off telecommunications and internet from the Gaza Strip at least 10 times, according to the Euromed Monitor Group, often just before an escalation. As if, the attempt to hide it from the world, the attempt to just slip this mass murder under the radar just could not be more clear. All right. That is all we have for today. Ending again on a pretty depressing note. We will be back tomorrow with more on all of these stories.